GitHub is much more than the place where you can store code. But let's see it in action. Meet Mona, a developer who's just been assigned a new project. Mona uses GitHub projects to manage her tasks and track iterations of work. GitHub's customizable views, filters, and layouts make it easy for teams to work their way. Mona quickly sets up an on-demand development environment using GitHub Codespaces. No more fighting with dependencies. She dives into coding with GitHub Copilot, making her code more readable and efficient. She then sets up automated testing with GitHub Actions, easily version controlled like the rest of her code. Meanwhile, Mona's colleague had set up repository rules to enforce DevOps governance practices across their GitHub organization. Mona avoids leaking secrets by using GitHub Advanced Security secret scanning push protection, and also identifies potential security vulnerabilities using code scanning. In this short video, we've seen how GitHub can streamline your experience throughout the development lifecycle.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining from. It's so excited to be back on GitHub Twitch again. And today we'll be talking about the All in Open Source program. And I'm really, really excited to have to host this panel with awesome leaders in open source. So while they come up shortly, today we'll be talking about the All in Open Source program. And what it is that we're a community committed to advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we have several programs that help create access for underrepresented people in tech, for maintainers as well. I see that next month is Maintainers Month. So I think this conversation that we are going to have today is going to usher us into Maintainers Month. So I'm excited to hear everything that our panelists have to say. I'm going to be introducing them shortly. So first we'll have Catherine Kiru. Catherine is a software developer based in Kenya, and she's passionate about building solutions at the intersection of technology, and her diverse skill set has enabled her to adapt and contribute to rich perspectives to product and engineering teams. Personally, I do know Catherine, and it has been such a pleasure to work with Catherine over the years. And I think I didn't do an introduction of myself. I think I'm also it's been a while I've been on the GitHub Twitch, so I'm forgetting my lines here. So I'm Ruth Ikega, and I am the program manager at All in Africa, and also one of the GitHub stars based in Africa. So yeah, I just introduced Catherine. Catherine will be one of our panel guests, and also Catherine is also an All in Africa regional ambassador. So you'll be getting to know what that means in some minutes. So the next panelist I would love to introduce is Peculiar. Peculiar is an Android developer and a program manager and the regional ambassador for West Africa. And it's been lovely to also work with Peculiar as well to shape the program at All in Open Source. And I'll also be introducing two more panelists. I'll be introducing Kayla as well. Kayla is a software engineering major at Grand Canyon University. Kayla is one of our ambassadors at the All In for Students program, and it's so lovely to meet Kayla, and I'm excited to hear all the things that she does around open source and in tech. So welcome, Kayla. And I'll be introducing lastly Antonio. Antonio Pedro is a computer science and engineering graduate, and he has a strong interest in distributed systems and cloud native related technologies. And Antonio also runs the Angola open source community and is one of our regional ambassadors for the Central Africa region at All in Africa. So I'll be introducing. I think Antonio is coming up shortly. Okay, so we have a full panel and everybody's here. So welcome once again to all the ambassadors. And I'm just going to do, and welcome to our audience as well, listening to us. Please tell us where you're joining us from in the comments, what country you're watching from, and we'll be excited to see it. And definitely please keep your questions. Even as I ask the panelists some questions, we'll also be taking some questions from the chat as well. So, like I said, we're talking about All in Open Source, the All in Open Source project, and specifically our access programs, which is All in Africa and All in for Students. So, a brief introduction on these programs. These are programs that aim to provide education, technical opportunities, and career development for underrepresented people in tech. For the All in for Students program is for the US region. For students based in the US, and then the All in Africa program is catered for the people based here in Africa that are looking to learn about open source and find opportunities. And we have panelists here from both programs that will share insights with us about how they're advocating for underrepresented people in tech, how they're advocating for open source, and even the challenges that they go through as they make their advocacy. So I'll be starting with the first question, and this is me being even curious to how did you get into open source? You're all like reading through your bios, like it's inspiring. So how did you get into open source? How did you get into advocating for people? So I think maybe Catherine, you can start us with, and then we can popcorn it to the next person.
All right. Hi, Ruth, and I hope everyone can hear me. Hi, everyone.
Okay.
Fantastic. All right. Well, it's really awesome being here. It's really nice being back on a GitHub panel, and thank you for the introduction too. So I think my journey into open source goes way back when, and I believe that's where we met with Ruth at SheCode Africa. And my journey started with the Contributhon program, where I contributed to the Jenkins project. And I think that's where my passion for open source started, because I'd never dealt with any Jenkins project before or even handled any code written in Java. So it felt almost magical that through open source, I get access to this very advanced code bases. I get to see the behind the scenes of how some of these projects and programs are created. And so that kind of got me into this rabbit hole of, okay, what more do we have in open source? What more can I find from it? And then also, because of the work that you are doing, with advocating for open source, especially on Twitter, I was constantly seeing, all these activities you're doing on open source. You see it enough times and you're like, okay, fine, let me see what it's all about. And yeah, you get into it and you discover that open source is it's this amazing environment and community that you can build a successful and fulfilling career from. and it forms a foundation for a lot of people who are interested in tech, right? Anyone who's interested in tech right now might not, if let's say they're transitioning into tech or they're just graduating from university, they might not be accepted, for example, into, they might not get a software engineering job or a program management job, let's say at Google immediately. But because of open source, you actually get access to some of these opportunities that you would have never gotten through the traditional path of applying for opportunities and getting interviews. So it's a great primer for you to know also which path do you want to specialize in when it comes to tech. So I'd say that's how I got started into my journey with open source. It basically presented an amazing foundation for me to explore my creativity and also to explore all the things that I've been interested in tech. And sometimes I like to think of open source as this amazing platform where I get to explore my quote unquote side quests. So if my main job and my main skills that I specialize in is software development, but my side quests, I get to explore them through open source. So I get into community management, I get into project management, I get into writing, and all of that has been facilitated by open source. So yeah, that's my journey so far.
Yeah, so that's so inspiring. Thank you for sharing, Catherine. I think I'll move it to Kayla because, like, Kayla has a very interesting story of being one of the, students in the program and even becoming an ambassador. So, Kayla, how did you get into open source, and how did you join the Out in Africa program?
Yeah, I was going to say my background is probably going to be a lot different for everyone else since I'm still in school. During my sophomore year in undergrad, GitHub had the pilot program for All In where they introduced what open source was. And being a student, internship opportunities were a little challenging to obtain. So I did apply for the pilot program. I was accepted, and this is when I was introduced to the world of open source. We came from a web development perspective. We learned how to work with different frameworks like React, WordPress, and just building personal portfolios. And that was something that I was able to get hands on experience with my sophomore year. After graduating undergrad, they had an ambassador opportunity where they wanted me to assist students who were currently completing the program I already did. Now, by then, it had extended from when I started, was probably like 70 students to over 300, 400. So a lot
Wow.
has changed and grew since then. And I kind of had to hit the ground running with seeing where the students were, but being able to kind of shadow them and assist them with completing their project was definitely something I enjoyed as an ambassador program. And then here I am now sharing my experience. So I'm definitely excited to be here.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for sharing. Antonio, how about you? How did you get into open source?
Hi, it's nice to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. So my story in open source started, I think, when I was in high school. I From the high school program, I remember my prof mentioning about open source, like when we were talking about Linux, because Linux is one of the largest open source project we have in the world. But I didn't really knew what open source word means until I participated in a local event about technology organized by GDG Luanda, which is a Google developer group Luanda, where they were running a hackathon. They were running a hackathon or just a contest where all the developers who want to participate had to put their project open source. So they say your project should be live on GitHub. Everyone should be able to see your code and etc. I had a project at that time, but I didn't really like the idea of having my code on publicly available so everyone can see it, etc. Because I had ambitions on that project. So at that time, I didn't go for open source. I didn't choose to like make my project open source. But after that, I started researching more on open source, and what are the benefits of putting my project open source, how can people learn from them, and also how I can learn from that experience. So I started researching, and in 2019 I think I started developing some project and put open source. And firstly, contributing to open source, I started when I started college. I think in 2021, when I was in second year, I made my first contribution. And then I heard about this Google Summer of Code program, where I was also attempting. Then I came to know about LFX mentorship. I think there is also this MLS fellowship, which also they are also partner of Alin Africa. And yeah, I graduated from LFX mentorship in 2023, second term. I contributed to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, specifically to Streamzy project. Streamzy is a project that provides many ways to deploy Apache Kafka cluster on Kubernetes environments. And the other I have been from there, I have been contributing actively to open source, and from my LFX mentorship experience, I founded the Angola Open Source Community, which is a community that aims to promote the adoption and development of open source technology in Angola.
Oh, that's really so impressive. Like I really love how you were able to connect what you were doing and help your community. And I think that's why we're here. I'm kind of talking about the work that you as leaders are doing in your respective communities and spaces. So I really like that's so impressive. I think lastly, Peculiar, how did you get involved in open source?
Okay, I got involved in open source through, uh, I just saw a post about contributing to Outreach, apply to Outreach open source internship. So I don't really know much about open source then. That was in 2020. And what I did was I applied. So I don't know much about open source. And I asked someone a question, what else do I do after I've applied for this internship? So he said, okay, I should like send a mail to something Godi that he is into open source and he can direct me. I did send a mail and he sent me some link. In that link, I saw about Hacktober. So I also applied and started contributing. And fortunately for me, I was accepted into Outreach a contributing stage. So during that period, I contributed to some of the some projects and also contributed to outreach. That was outreach contributing stage. And during that period, I was able to make about five contributions. And at the end of the day, I was rewarded for contributing to Hacktober, and that was it. So I got interested and I was contributing to Opia open source project. So I was also learning because I found out that there were some topics in Android development then I'm not aware of, but through open source, I was able to learn all those things fast and ask questions from my mentors then, and they were able to help me to learn it more. So from that 2020, I continued contributing to open source. And while I was at Andela Learning Community, that was in 2022, I had the opportunity to lead the Andela Learning Community open source program. So that's uh, got my interest to learn more about open source. So since then, I've been contributing to open source and doing a lot in open source. I also like decided to create a community for people to come in, build projects and collect and contribute together. So that's how I got into open source, and since then I've been doing a lot in open source community. Thank
Yeah, that's really nice. Thank you for sharing, Peculiar. And getting into outreach, it's very, very competitive. And for you to have gotten in, you really did know your onions, and that's so good. So I want to move the question over to your roles as regional ambassadors and even all in ambassadors in general, right? Like what are the insights that you've learned from advocating for open source in your region, advocating for these learners, these people that are finding it difficult to access open source technology, or even having doubts about open source? What are those key things that you have learned? And you all do a great job advocating for all in open source, and like even within your regions, within different countries, within schools as well, for Kayla. So like what are those key things that you have learned and you have observed? What are those challenges that you've seen from the people that you advocate for, and how can we even solve these challenges? So I'll start off with Catherine, and then we go from there.
Okay, great. I think one of the biggest insights that I've picked up from this program is how much people want to collaborate, to build projects together and to learn together, and also the fact that we still have a lot of work to do to get people to know more about open source, beyond just the software, because from what I've seen, a lot of people might think that open source software is very complicated. But what they do not know is that open source software is simply software that is built by the community, and most times for the community. So someone who's never worked with open source software might think they're not skilled to work with it, and yet they actually have the technical and even the non-technical skills for it. So there's a lot of awareness that needs to still be done. There's a lot of education that we can still do for people to just help onboard as many people as possible into the open source software community. So those are some of the biggest insights I've picked up so far.
Yeah, I think I can really relate to what you say. Like, still, like, there's still some work that needs to be done around, and that's something that we want to keep improving on with like the different programs from all in open source. Like, keep improving on these programs, keep improving on the contents that we're giving out to people, making sure that it is really quality to our learners. So I want to move it to Antonio, and one very obvious thing I see is the language barrier, and Angola is Portuguese speaking, and even some countries around the Central Africa region. How what are those? Can you throw more light on like that, even language barrier and even other challenges that you might have noticed?
Yeah, sure. Uh, I think what I have learned so far is like open source, or getting started in open source is like when you join a new company, right? So the company might have a lot of projects, they might have a large code base, and you as a new employee or new developer, you have to make sure that you understand everything before you start making new contributions. But the difference is that in open source, there is no one to onboard you directly. There is no one to guide you, like to tell you, like, this is this work like this, and etc. The only thing that you have is the documentation, the guidelines on how to contribute, and etc. And another difference, like, you have to do the onboarding yourself in most of the cases. So you need to make sure that you understand the project. You need to make sure that you understand how to start making new contributions, and etc. So this is what most of beginners, mainly in Alien Africa project, face. Uh, Beside the language barrier, because most of the projects are like, most of the project documentation, the project itself are in English, and in our region, like, the most predominant language is French and Portuguese in Central Africa. So it makes very difficult to our community members to start contributing to open source. But how we are overcoming this project with Alien Africa is like, we give them the technical knowledge that they need to understand how open source projects work, and how it is it like how the contribution workflow looks like, because there is a flow, right? There is a flow starting from understanding the project, understanding the documentation, and starting making the actual documentation. And to make the actual documentation, oh, to make the actual contributions, you need to make sure that you have the basic knowledge to make your contributions, like Git, the distributed version controlling. So in Alien Africa, we teach Git through practical examples, to practical activities, and we simulate a project where the learners can make contributions to project. We have different modules, and we also have a specific module for contributions where all the participants have to make at least 4 contributions. And I think this experience, this environment that we are creating in Alien Africa will make it possible to learn it to start contributing to other projects, because the most difficult part is understanding the project and having the basic skills to start making those contributions.
Yeah, I really like that challenge, the last challenge you kind of highlighted, how it can be very difficult. Like even with some communities that still have some onboarding process, it also like still had to go through the documentation, know what to like, how do I when I join this project or when I find an open source project, what do I do? What's the next step? Where do I find what to work on? Because you're just like in the middle of nowhere sometimes, right?
Exactly.
And yeah,
Uh-huh.
it can be pretty hard. And even with our modules, like the module where we for context, for the audience, for our learners, we have like a module where we require them to do
To make
like contributions, actual contributions to finish up the program. So sometimes we get people find it difficult to make
to
those contributions because like they don't know where to get started, they don't know what even counts as the contribution sometimes, right? So I
yes.
think even like with the support we give, this is like some of the challenges that we see generally that happen. So I think if maintainers are listening, I think that's good insight for them, right? So I'll move it to Kayla. What are the challenge? Like you have mentioned how like you from school you got to know about the All in Open Source program through school, and like what are the challenges that students in in your like school or students around other schools like you've seen? What are those challenges that they face?
So I would say similar to All in Africa's program, this is not a topic that's widely discussed or brought up in schools. A lot of time, our educational background with computer science is primarily focused in coding, data analytics, maybe some UI, UX type of work. So to hear about open source seems a little, I don't want to say discouraging, but it does seem a little unsettling and scary because it's something you've never heard of. And so I feel like for me as an ambassador, trying to kind of dumb it down to comparing it to working on maybe a huge Google Doc that is for coding to let students know it's like a big community project. Now, I will say, coming from a student perspective, when you have students in different extracurriculars, I will say that I felt that time commitment and the consistency in uploading things was an issue for some students because they primarily did have school to focus on, and this was almost like a like Catherine said, a side quest. And so to keep that engagement was something that I noticed was a little challenging at times, especially when we maybe had different stand-up meetings or just check-ins with the students. But I will say overall, I feel like GitHub did a great job with trying to incentivize the program to keep students motivated and even giving them options of applying for possible internship opportunities after the fact. So I felt like that networking and community building aspect of open source was something that was assisting with the engagement of students.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for sharing that. I think sometimes like when I see like for the All In for Students program, when I see some questions that they pose, some questions that they ask, you see that for some of them they might have no like head of open source or they're not used to it, right? So and then I can even still relate to the curriculum here, like even here in Africa and like with particularly in Nigeria, the schools like computer science, even for people that study computer science, I barely think they even have something around like open source education or open source technology within those like courses they take. Sometimes it can even be outdated. So I think even for some schools here, you can also relate to that. So thank you for sharing, Kayla. And lastly, Peculiar, what are these challenges that you have noticed in your time as as a regional ambassador? Oh, I think you're muted, Peculiar.
No. As a regional ambassador for West Africans, the challenges we face is, I mean, some of them they don't really know what does it mean to even send a PR, right? So some of them are just coming into the world of open source for the first time. Some of them are learning how to collaborate, how to whole lot of things they're learning, and those things sometimes when they try on their own and they get frustrated, they'll just like give up. Another thing again is the code base, right? When the code base is they can't understand what's going on here. You know, you see them asking questions. I don't even know what to do, and the code is too much for me to take my time to go through to understand. But then in all your Africa, we get them and we encourage them. Sometimes it takes to take them one-on-one session because if you just like in a general session and you just explain everything, yeah, there are still some people. One, they won't ask questions because they don't know what even ask sometimes. And then another thing is that they will feel like, okay, if I ask, they will think I don't know anything. So mostly in only in open source, we reach out to them one on one and find out what are the challenges, like all the courses we have for them assignment. You see some not doing it at all because not because they don't want, but because they don't know how to go about them. So reach out to them one on one and find out okay what actually is the problem. And that one on one session with me and them is always awesome time because then they will open up and tell you, okay, I don't know what to do, how to create a PR. Okay, what I did, is it really PR? Means so you have that time, you have to take time to teach, not just now, just telling them, you have to teach them, okay, when you do this, when you move from here to here, this is what you need to do. This is Git, and this is how to send a PR. This is what this PR means actually. Pull request. So all those challenges is what we see them face. And another thing is how to find a simple because they're just beginners. They find looking for first issues to contribute to. That's another thing. So we see all these things. We'll have them at times. We expose them to projects, help them find issues, guide them and teach them, okay, this is how to do it so that next time you can do it this way or that way. Sometimes we see those in content writer, designers, product managers looking for how to contribute to open source. So in all in Africa also, we guide them, look for projects that they can easily contribute to. And one thing I like about them is that willingness for them to learn. Once they learn, you see them continue, moving from contributing from uh, one project to another to complete the task for them to be able to graduate from the program. So these challenges we've seen, and then we are like we keep telling them, we're here for you. Just say it. We will be there to help you out. I know sometimes you see someone saying, "Okay, I just have time now because I'm at work. Can you help me?" And we are available at all time to say, "Okay, come up, let's do it. Let me show you how to go about this." And as soon as that is done, you see them moving forward to contribute to open source. So over here in West African region, we see a whole lot of them does not really are not really exposed, right? A whole lot of them need that help to help them understand some code base. Once you help them, guide them on how to do that, you see them pick up and they run with it. So that's it for here.
Yeah, that thank you so much for sharing, Peculiar. And like I think I want to kind of even emphasize on one of the things you talked about, which is like the documentation sometimes is not enough, right? Like you also need like mentorship. The
Yeah.
concept of mentorship, the concept of guiding people, and the work that, as leaders we do for people that are trying to learn is really important. So, like, having that person that you can ask questions, because for some people open source is very is collaborative. There are a lot of people from different parts of the world trying to all contributing to the same project, and sometimes some
Yeah.
people get shy, get you know they don't want to ask questions in public spaces, right? Which is fine, but like, because they can go to someone, because there's somebody that's serving as a mentor, they can sort out some of these issues that sometimes it might not be big issues, but when they get to talk to it with somebody that they see as a leader, it's easier for them to navigate through it, right? I think maybe even sharing one personal story. When I started doing open source, when I started contributing to open source, I had really big issues with Git, using Git and trying to send my code down to, like, the from my local system to GitHub, and like it was so frustrating. I remember one particular day I kept deleting, like, the forked repository over and over again, and I kept deleting it just to make one simple change, right? Because I felt I was making a mistake. But when I got on a call with, like, somebody that was more experienced, they showed me, like, a simple trick that I do not have to, like, delete this entire thing to start over again. I don't have to start over again. I can just reverse this commit. Like, it's a simple command, right? So it's I could have been struggling if I did not have somebody to, ask that simple question. So sometimes documentation is not enough, and having leaders, mentorship is really, really an important concept in open source. So thank you so much for sharing, Clear. I think for the people that are listening, you can ask questions. We'll soon start taking questions. So please feel free to. I think I see one question, but like, you can keep asking your questions, and the regional ambassadors will be taking the questions. So the other question I want to ask is about success stories, because we have talked about the challenges that you're seeing, right? I want to hear the success stories and the proud moments that you have had as, All in Africa, or All in for Students Ambassador, right? So, like, what are those proud moments that you have had? Antonio, do you want to start off?
Maybe we can start with Kayla.
No worries, sure.
Yeah, no problem. Well, I'll say, while being in the program, I know numbers of students who were able to get internship opportunities with companies like Red Hat. And so I feel like that was very encouraging, being introduced to something that we've never dealt with before in our academic matriculation, and then being able to work with a major company like that, or even furthering someone like in my position, furthering to connect with GitHub is something that I like to do. Now, being an ambassador, I think one of the major things that I like to see as far as the success stories with students being able to put this in their personal websites, put it as part of their portfolios, and then further take that knowledge and carry it into various internship opportunities, possibly even teaching other students and applying to be ambassadors. I know that at the end of my most previous cohort, students were asking me, how do I become an ambassador? What's next for us? We don't want to stop doing this. So I definitely saw an increase in engagement and passion in what they were doing, because I feel like even compared to our traditional courses, it is not that fun sometimes. And so to be able to be presented with an internship opportunity or personal project that can be built into your passion was something that I love to see students grow into.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I think I did also like that. I think there was one story missing out that I didn't share, like a personal story about how, you were able to get your own internship as well. So maybe we can you can share that later. Um, so I think Catherine, do you want to share?
Yeah, sure. I think one of my favorite experiences with All In Africa is seeing how we've managed to introduce open source to people who previously did not care so much about it, or not even just care about it, but they didn't know much about it enough for them to want to know more about it, right? So and with open source, it tends to be like that. It's like in the background of a lot of people's minds. They're like, oh, I want to contribute, but I don't know where to start. I want to do it, but I don't know where to start. So they just put it at the back of their minds. But then again, when you now bring this huge concept of open source and you bring it home, and I especially love the way you structured the program for it to go within the regions. So sort of like making open source something easy to understand, simply because it's attached to something that people are familiar with, right? So let's say the way that open source was attached to Peculiar, someone is familiar with Peculiar, and so they're interested in getting to know more about it. Or open source is attached to Antonio, or it's attached to Kayla, or it's attached to Ruth. So when we give open source, when we make it that accessible, that someone can look at Peculiar and say, oh, Peculiar is doing it, so I can also do it. So seeing that transformation from people who were previously like, I'm not sure if I want to get into open source, but I'm curious about it. And then they see that we've brought it home, and now they're like, oh, okay, I'm curious, I want to apply for it. And then you actually see them getting into the program, and then they take part in the courses, and then you see them even teaming up with other people within the All in Africa. Now all of the regions coming together, and you see someone in East Africa partnering with someone in West Africa, in South Africa. So I think that is one of my biggest, I'd say, success stories that I've seen, that we have collectively managed to bring the concept of open source back home, and people are now seeing the possibilities that they can achieve through this container called open source. And now, just to be specific, you see now people who have never done an open source pull request, they get to know how to do it. People who have never participated in a hackathon, they actually get to participate in it. People who did not even know certain aspects of GitHub, getting to know more about it through maybe some of the sessions that we've had, and also just the fact that it's all attached to GitHub. So people basically get this all-in-one experience that that will make a huge impact in their lives going forward. So yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
the
thank
best
you.
thing.
I think I can
Yeah.
share more. Like I can say that's also my favorite moment. Even meeting different people
Yeah.
across different countries or different parts of Africa, knowing that they are developed like people that are interested in open source, that's interesting for me, and I love to see that collaboration happen. So Antonio, do you want to share now?
Yes, sir. So one of the biggest achievements in Island Africa specifically is was seeing lots of Angolans contributing to open source, because back in 2018 and back 2018-19 there were no just mature open source community in Angola, and through Angola open source community we started making people believe that they can start contributing to open source and the reasons why they should start contributing to open source. We have organized workshops, we have organized a hackathon. In fact, we have partnered with the Chaos Africa to organize our first event. We organized some hackathon in Angola, and we had approximately I think 100 contributions in a month, and it was a big achievement for me seeing a lot of open source contributions from Angolan folks to international projects around Africa and around the world. More specifically to All in Africa, this also make me proud seeing uh, folks from Central Africa, even though the program has already ended, they are still making contributions. There is a participant from Angola that is actively contributing to Chaos Africa and other projects, and she's also writing articles on open source, how to get started in open source. And I think this is something wonderful because she is not only contributing, but she's also encouraging people to getting started to open source, and that is amazing.
Yeah, I can say same. Like, seeing that these learners go on to become advocates themselves is so inspiring to see. So, Peculiar, do you want to share your proudest moments? And
Okay, one of my proudest moments were okay as an open source West African regional ambassador. There are a lot of them. Okay, during the first cohort, after the program, we saw a lot of learners. Some of them mentioned I've got job there. What I've learned in open source has helped me being able to contribute to this project. What I've learned in All in Africa program has been helped me to being able to contribute to one project or the other. And another one is in my community. When I say, okay, so in my state where I stay, I was walking on the road one day. Someone approached me. I was like, "Are you social person for All in Africa?" I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Okay, I was accepted into the program." I said, "Okay, oh, that's awesome." That's how we started mentorship, and everything started. I started encouraging him before the program even started. This happened, so I started encouraging him from the beginning of the program till we get to hackathon. And I was encouraged myself do it because when you join in a hackathon, there's some benefits you will get if you actually work amazingly on your project. So he took it upon himself. At the end of the day, he was part of those that his project was selected during the hackathon and he won something. He was so excited and he wrote about it. That made it wasn't me, but I was so proud. I feel like fulfilled. I was like, oh, this is the best. And that is amazing. So another one is like through this cohort, I have this Lena came to me. I don't know. He's not in my region, but he just came to me and was like, please, can you help me to set up Ruby? I want to contribute. I'm learning Ruby and I want to contribute to this open source project and it's on Ruby. Can you help me set up the environment? I was like, what? Ruby? I'm an Android developer, not I don't have that skill. So what I did was like, okay, should I leave it the learner to wait? No, I did. I don't want to leave it to wait. I have to go to learn this skill. I have to go to research, read documentation so that I can help him out. And at the end of the day, I was able to help him out, set up the environment, and I was so proud of myself, like under normal circumstances, I would have gone to learn Ruby because that's not part of the language, my language. But because of him, because of this learner, just for me to be able to help him so that he can continue. If not, he might get discouraged and then say, I want to drop. For me to be able to help, I have to go and do that. It took me days, but then I did it. And I was so proud of it. And the joy it gives for seeing that just that one learner moving forward in the program is just amazing. Thank you.
yeah, that's really inspiring to hear, and I'm happy you were able to help that person, set up their environment, because I can relate that it can really discourage some people, when you're trying to, even learn a particular programming language, and sometimes the code keeps failing. It can get very discouraging. So thank you so much for going, that far to help that learner. So I think we are rounding up. Just as a round up question, I know like people have been, listening to your story. People have been hearing the work that you do. They will be interested. Some people might not be open source contributors. Some people might be. So what's your recommended path? Like, how do they get into open source? I know currently our All in Africa and All in for Students programs are closed, so I would have said, okay, go and apply to the program. But for people that want to get started, what would be your advice to them on how they can get started? And Kayla, do you want to start?
Sure, since I have limited knowledge on this. Now, granted, I did go through the All In for Students program, but I know that there are other opportunities out there. I would research via LinkedIn, someone that you know, like someone on the panel, but there's definitely a lot of opportunities to just get your feet wet. So I would definitely look into that on researching online and even looking at some repositories on GitHub to see things from there as well.
Thank you so much. Definitely, I think Andrea has been like putting up the different speakers, their handles. So please definitely connect with them. Bakulia, do you want to share? I think you're muted.
My advice to anyone who wants to get into open source or get into opportunities in open source is mostly is just like Google, or you can reach out to someone. Like I remember when I reached out to someone, I asked, okay, what should I do? It's okay. I don't know much about open source, but I can connect you to someone that is into open source. And just that connection helped me to learn more about open source. I could advise you can check on GitHub. You can ask questions. Anyone you see, open source advocate, open source here or there, uh, on GitHub, you can easily get I mean to know which project to contribute to or how to start. You can even ask, how do I start? There's so many documentation, there's so many articles that have been written about how to start your journey in open source or how to even make a career in open source. So I will advise you, and then look out for opportunities, in opportunities like apply for internship or apply for to contribute to this Google Summer of Code at Rishi. All those opportunities are out there for you to be able to learn or contribute to a lot of open source projects. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Antonio, do you want to share any advice, any tips?
Yeah, sure. So I think I will start by saying many people don't see the open source rewards because they don't do the contribution in the right way. What I mean is like when you are starting, you might feel like if you contribute to more and more open source contributions, then you are making a lot, like you are making quality contributions, and it's not like that. Quantity is not over quality, so you might stick into making quality contribution instead of just going to a lot of open source project and fix a typo issue, or maybe just changing one line, etc., etc. You know what I mean, right? So this is not good. That's not a good start point. If you are willing to getting started in open source, I advise you first try to find a project that you cares about and you like. For example, if you are into cloud native technology, if you like Kubernetes, if you like Docker, and you use Docker in your daily activities, just try to learn how to make contribution to Docker. So go to Docker documentation, see what do you need to start making new contributions. If you find it hard to understand, just go to the Slack channel, because I think most of the large open source project, they always have a communication channel where people can go and test the maintainers, test another contributors, and I'm sure and I can guarantee that they are there to help you if you are not getting anything. So just reach them, ask your questions, make sure you understand all of them. Then maybe you can, if you have already knowledge of Git, then you can start by cloning the repo and try to find a good first issue. So if you are not into open source, good first issue is a label issue that is likely very easy to beginners to contribute to like to fix that issue. So you might go with the good first issue. Just go to GitHub, explore good first issue on the project that you cares about, the project that you like, and make sure that you understand what's this task to be done. And if you don't understand, you can comment out, you can reach out to maintainer and ask more questions that are not uh, on the GitHub issue information or description. Just make sure you understand what needs to be done and then send you pull request. You don't need to be ashamed, or you don't need to be afraid like my code is not good enough. Mainly if you are beginner. So open sources for that, for learning. A lot of folks started with the pull request, and that's okay. It's a progress, right? We start by we were born, we didn't start walking or running Yeah, so it's a progress. You have to respect the progress and go through each step of of the process. So I think that's my advice. And for people who are already contributing to open source project, you need to keep the momentum, right? You need to keep contributing. You need to be part of the community. And this is also something that I would like to highlight. Like contributing to open source is most about being part of the community, right? So even if you are not even if you are sending a lot of pull requests and etc., but you are not in the community, you are not there to help people getting started, even if you are not there to talk in conferences, writing blogs and etc., you might still be hiding from the community, you must still be hiding from the open source rewards, as I say, because you are not showing up. So con- open source contribution is about being part of the community. So if you are already contributing to open source, just make sure you are in the community, you are participating in the community calls with your ideas, not only with the pull requests, open issues and etc. You are there to help others getting started in open source and many.
Thank you so much. That was like a fully packed advice. Thank you so much for sharing. And I like that quote that you gave on, quality over like quantity, right? Catherine, do you want to share briefly and then we take the questions? I think we have a few questions.
All right. Yeah. So my advice would be start with the skill that you want to specialize in, and then find the projects or activities or communities that cater to that specific skill that you want to focus on. And the reason is because that will help with you staying more committed to the project, because you already have enough context in terms of your skills and knowledge and experience. So you will be adding on to the project and not just starting from scratch. And then it will also help you see whether you want to grow with a project, because you're going to be able to measure where your skills are right now and where you actually want to go, and whether that particular project can help you get to that point. And then another thing, the reason why I like to use the skill approach is that you also know how you're going to add value to the project, because open source is not just a one-way experience, it's a two-way experience. You're also there to serve, you're also there to help the project grow, or even the project to succeed. So when you already have the skills and knowledge that you'd like to contribute, you will know what value to add and how and for how long you're going to add that value to the team, so that by the time you're leaving a project, you're able to say that because of your presence, you are able to achieve ABCD for the project, not just for the project, but even for you. So that's my advice.
Yeah, really great advice. So we have a couple of questions, and I'm going to just be posing it to some of the speakers, and you can just like take one. So we have because we're almost out of time. I think the first question that came in was, I think someone was asking around like, how do you become a maintainer, and like how difficult is it for maintainers to find code to merge in into the software? Does anybody want to go for that? Peculiar. Do you want to take that one?
Okay, yeah, how to become a maintainer is actually very simple. First, you need to like join a community and a project that you like, and you continuously first you contribute to that project. If you don't contribute to the project, you won't understand the code base, you won't understand the project, and you will not know what the project is, the problem that's solving with that particular project. So you have to be first a contributor to a particular project and consistently contribute to that project. So to be a maintainer for that project would be when, like, I remember up here Android project, when the maintainers or the leaders already there notice that, okay, this particular individual has contributed enough to be part of this, they can move you from being a contributor to being a maintainer based on your contribution. and you're being active in the community to teach others, because then you've already known a whole lot about the project. So you can actually help someone, new contributors coming in, you're already there to help them get to know about the code base, get to solve their issues, because you're already familiar with the product. So it's based, community can decide, okay, to take you as, okay, let's absorb this individual as a maintainer, because it's helping out in the community engagement is there, solving issues and a whole lot. And that's one way you can become a maintainer in an open source project. Another way is that you might decide to, okay, this, I want to start a community, or I want to build this, solve this problem, and then you start it up, make it open for a whole lot of people to contribute to that particular project. That way, you are the maintainer of that project as well. Why you have a whole lot of people coming and contributing to this project as an open source project. So that's ways you can become a maintainer. And remember, a maintainer, you need to know everything, almost everything about the product. And you can be able to be there to teach others, to guide them, to tell them everything they need to know about the product, and then to help them debug and solve their the issues or fix bug, or guide them on how to fix that bug. So that way you become a maintainer for an open source project.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think quickly we'll take the next question. So, Andra says most of us have to work, family responsibilities, and other personal life issues, making our time very limited. Even with limited, do you think we can make valuable contributions? Catherine, do you want to help with that?
Yeah, and that's a real question. I think everyone who's been in open source has had to ask themselves almost, well, every day, I guess. Yeah, it's possible to make meaningful contributions even when you have a lot of commitments in your life. I think what I've found to be helpful is to handle one project at a time, or maybe one or two or three projects, to try and limit the projects that I'm handling at a particular time, so that I can ensure I'm I'm doing a great job on the project while also still maintaining time for my other commitments. So because that's a challenge that I also had when I was starting my open source journey. I really wanted to do so many things at the same time. And I found myself burnt out, because you've committed yourself to so many projects, and then you still have your own commitments that you still need to meet every other day. So that's how I arrived at that point, and it's actually helped me make better contributions. It's helped me make more impact through the projects that I'm working on. And then what I tell myself is, I give myself a time limit with some of these projects. I tell myself that I'm probably going to work on this project, let's say for 3 months or for 6 months, and then I can offload the project to someone else to maintain, and then I move on to something else, while still being able to balance all of my other commitments that I have. So it basically gives me the opportunity to to experience the best of both worlds. That with open source, I get to do an amazing job on the few projects that I have carefully selected, while still at the same time still being able to maintain my commitment to the other commitments that I have in my life. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Because of the time, I've been answering some questions in the chat, but there's really one interesting question I saw from Vincent. Like, how do we show how cool coding truly is, especially in the wake of no code and generative AI that has become almost a new trend? How can I help, and how can we cultivate more communities? Right. Antonio, do you want to help with that?
So let me make sure I got the question. So the question is, how do we show how cool coding truly is, especially in the wake of the no-code and generative AI that has become almost a new trend? How can I help, and how can I cultivate more communities? So this is some interesting questions that I think this has much to do with what's going on in the industry right now with the generative AI and non-coding platform and etc. But I think with open source, maybe generative coding is there, but this is not what this is not a, how can I say, generative AI is not a threat to open source, I will say, because has the previous question, for example, we were talking about how do we keep momentum when you have a lot of responsibilities and still you have to make contributions. So technologies like GitHub Copilot are there to help you be more productive while coding, right? So if you are making a contributions, you can use, for example, ChatGPT to understand the issue, for example, right? And with GitHub Copilot, there is a this feature of contest, workspace contest, and etc., where you can actually understand how the codes is organized and where everything is and etc. So you can make use of those technology to help you be more productive and accelerate the process of contributions. So I don't think thus this is really a threat to open source, uh, but we have to make sure that we understand what we are doing. We have to make sure like what is the solution we are proposing and etc.
Yeah, I think I do agree with you, Antonio. Like, I think generative AI kind of, it supports to help make our life more productive as developers, as community members, as open source developers as well. So I think it's also it's something that should be productive for us, even though like I think there are some scares around, like the use of like generative AI around like open source, or like even with sensitive data, with copy paste code. But I think giving like the right principles, going through the right
Yeah.
principles,
If
using
you
it
make
to,
the right use, yes.
yeah, the right use case as well, and
Mhm.
also sharing the right use case in your communities, as you even
Yes.
share the use of generative AI, like doing workshops, doing sessions on how to properly use generative AI can be helpful to your community. So we're a bit over time, and like it has been a very interesting panel. There are still some questions, but I'll definitely recommend that you follow the panelists, and you can post these questions to them via DM. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you so much to the All In Ambassadors for being here, sharing a lot of insights, taking this time out of your day to share insights with people. This is being recorded, so it will be up for a while and people can still access it. Thank you everyone, and I'll let you all have a lovely evening, afternoon, or morning. Take care. Bye.